Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Historical Society of Frankfurt's June lecture meeting. It is our last lecture of the season. We will be back to you in September. Tonight we have readings from the book, The Borough of Frankfurt by John Manton. This is a book that gives a broad sketch of the Frankfurt community, and he presents an authoritative introduction to Frankfurt's interesting stories and important events, significant sites throughout long time. To kick off the meeting, we are going to have our president, Jerry Kolankiewicz, introduce, and here he is. Let's bring him on. Hi, Jerry.
Thank you, Vanessa, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to this. As Vanessa said, this is our last meeting of the spring season of 2022, and we'll be taking a summer vacation for the next 2 months, and we'll be back in September. I'm not sure if we have a September program nailed down at this point, but we'll keep you posted on that. So without any further ado, let me introduce John Buffington, our board member, and he'll start with the readings. Thank you.
Good evening. I hope that you share our joy tonight in celebrating this wonderful gift that we got from John Manton. Not just a book, but all of the work that went into the book and the reproduction rights and all of the profits from the sale of the book be over the cost of production. It's an extremely generous, unprecedented gift that we got from Mr. Manton. And it's very much on point for us. The book is The Borough of Frankfurt. And he's basically, for the most part, he's covered the period from 1800 to 1920. The borough was organized in 1800. Now, we were here well before that as a place of European settlement, and well before that as a place of Lenape residents. But John Manton is a special collections librarian, basically. He has a master's degree in special collections from Drexel University. And he likes material that's actually well documented. He is not a theoretical historian. He hasn't gone back and followed up on rumored and traditional stories that aren't real well documented. And he's different in that regard from most of what has been done in the recording of Frankfurt history in the past, or certainly until recently. Historical standards, of course, have tightened up over time. Academics today have much more rigorous requirements for proof than the people who originally founded this society did in 1905, when it was basically going to be a storytelling place, and they met on a regular basis to tell stories, as we do still on these occasions, these eight meetings we do a year, 8 program meetings we do a year. But we've tightened up our expectations about the documentation that we hope to see. And this book that John Manton has done is remarkable in the thoroughness of the research that's gone into it and the scope of what he's done, which is an introduction, a general introduction to all things Frankfurt from 1800 to 1920. It's an overview. He hopes to inspire further research. Let me read you a little bit of what he says about his intention here. I hope that this guide to the historic sources, sites, and institutions of Frankfurt will prove to be of inestimable value to its users in future, as the institutions fade from history and the sites they once occupied are redeveloped for another use, leaving only their records and other now historic documents to tell their story. To the best of my knowledge, there really is no book published on the history of Frankfurt that places into the reader's hands nearly everything that they would like to know about a region their families once came from. That's an understatement. It's absolutely true. We've been doing this since 1905, and nobody has ever put together anything like this ambitious, let us say, a survey of all of the history that went on during a large portion of our history, not all of it, but a large portion of it, the best documented portion up through 1920. And it's just going to be a fabulous resource to us. It's going to be useful to docents when we recruit docents who need to be newly trained in what to say, showing people around Frankfurt and showing people around here, around this building, where we do have lots and lots of material pertinent to the history of Frankfurt. It's going to be an extremely useful resource to history teachers in and around Northeast Philadelphia, not just Frankfurt, but generally around Northeast Philadelphia. I'd love to have the resources to put a copy of the book into the hands of every history teacher in this part of the city, and they will be able to use it as a source book for ideas for people to do term papers and history papers of a more general nature. So it's really going to help us to do what we do here. It's an essential tool to helping us do what we do here, which is to promote and preserve the history of Frankfurt and nearby communities. That's our mission. And that's been our mission since 1905. So we really appreciate it. Thank you, John Manton. We're sorry you're ailing tonight, and we hope you get better soon. So back to Vanessa.
Thanks, John. Alrighty. So now I am going to introduce Fred Moore. Fred Moore is a longtime friend and supporter of the Historical Society of Frankfurt. He is also a board member with the Friends of the Northeast Philadelphia History Network. He was also a major consult for much of the material in this book, as I understand, and also its publishing. He's definitely a go-to guy for knowing how to get some good history out there. So he's going to do a couple readings from the book. And here we go. We'll bring him in. Hi, Fred. Good to see you.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you to the Historical Society of Frankfurt. Thank you to John Manton. Thank you to John Buffington. John failed to mention that he was the first initial contact with John Manton about this book. I think John had, they met at where?
The Philadelphia City Archives.
Back in the summer or spring of 2019.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And John Manton mentioned to John Buffington that he was working on this book, which is, the subtitle is A Guide to the Historic Sources, Sites, and Institutions, 1800 to 1920. So it is a guidebook. It's a wonderful guidebook. I was hoping that when we had this is before COVID, we all had hopes before COVID. I guess we have hopes still, but that we could do maybe an outdoor gathering and kind of do a little walk around, say Overington Park or something like that, which is mentioned in the book. it's a wonderful guidebook to take with you around Frankfurt. But so John Buffington got this rolling and gave me a call because he knew that I had done some publishing with the Friends of Northeast Philadelphia History via lulu.com, which is a print on demand. And so I got in touch with Manton, and we spent that summer of 2019 and the fall, and this was finally published, I think, in just before COVID, maybe November of 2019. So it is a guidebook, but there are some, he does some writing in it as well. He's a storyteller. John Manton is, John Buffington is for that matter. Maybe all Johns are storytellers. This is from the biographies section of the book on George Frederick Juan Rath. George F. Juan Rath was born at Kassel, Hesse, Germany in 1798. His marriage to Henrietta Herring in Baltimore County, Maryland on October 1st, 1821, produced at least 4 children that we know of. Although he was a furrier by trade with an office at 415 Arch Street in Philadelphia, George Juan Rath apparently amassed a fortune which he increased through local real estate acquisitions during his lifetime. There's little more known of his life beyond the fact that he died on March 16th, 1864, when he was 66. He is interred at Monument Cemetery, which once existed at Broad and Burke Street in Philadelphia. His wife, Henrietta, outlived him by 23 years. It was a short repose for both of them in their cemeteries, in the Monument Cemetery. In 1956, the cemetery, which had no interment since the 1920s, was acquired by Temple University for a parking lot and athletic field. According to surviving cemetery records, George F. Juan Rath remains were translated to the burial ground at Abington Friends Meeting. A public park and street name nearby the site of his mansion were named for him and appear to be the only surviving evidence he ever lived in Frankfurt. I'm going to go to the parks and playground section, and we are going to look at Juan Rath Park, circa 1894. Named in honor of George F. Juan Rath, a local merchant in fur trade and real estate speculations. This park comprises 2.5 acres and is situated on a triangular parcel of land bounded by Kensington Adams and Frankfurt Avenues. There are concrete walkways that meander through it, and there's a public toilet or utility building at the Adams Avenue end. The park is shaded by several buttonwood trees. Bids were taken in 1894 for the removal of houses and other buildings on land that were deemed old and worthless. This park first appears on the property maps in 1894. Band concerts were held there in the early 20th century, although there is no evidence of a band pavilion today. There has been much discussion over the years about a boulder placed at the very tip of Juan Rath Park that once contained a bronze plaque commemorating the first building and loan association in the United States at Frankfurt. Formal dedication took place in August 1931. Several years later, someone saw monetary value in the bronze and removed the plaque, leaving the boulder with a square impression where it once stood. This boulder is all that remains of the community's effort to commemorate an important historical event. The photos below, and there are some photos in the book. That's an example of a guidebook, if you will, to one of the parks in Frankfurt. Next, I'll do a little on chronology, I believe. It is. It's an interesting way of reviewing Frankfurt history. He goes through the different presidents and what happened in Frankfurt during the years that those men were presidents. And we're going to do Ulysses S. Grant, 1869 to 1877. 1869, Knights of Pythias found Greenwood Cemetery, and they hire the architect Thomas S. Levy to design its grounds. The Second Baptist Church of Frankfurt is organized. A cornerstone laid for the Seventh United Presbyterian Church at Orthodox at Leeper Street. A new congregation organizes at St. Stephen's P.E. Church at Whitehall. 1870, a new congregation is organized as the Frankfurt Avenue M.E. Church. A cornerstone is laid for the St. Stephen's P.E. Church. 1871, a cornerstone is laid for the Frankfurt Avenue M.E. Church, Methodist Episcopal First Church building. St. Thomas M.E. Church, colored, is organized. 1873, the Orthodox M.E. Church is organized. The Herbert School is opened. 1874, a cornerstone is laid for the second St. Joachim's R.C. Church, Roman Catholic Church. The Wilmot Public School is open for education of colored children. 1875, the Orthodox M.E. Church is dedicated. 1876, the Central M.E. Church is organized. This is an example of how John goes about some of the dates very quickly in chronological order. So that's another guide, a chronological guide to Frankfurt. And as you can see, many, many things are churches, the building of churches, the opening of churches, and during the Grant administration, there were quite a few. Next is that I wanted to just do a brief reading from fire departments. Before 1854, Frankfurt's fires were fought by volunteer fire companies. Such companies existed in every district, borough, and township throughout the county of Philadelphia. 19th century volunteer fire companies often fought with one another over encroachment of the territory, ownership of fire plugs, and politics. This uneasy environment was most severe in the city of Philadelphia, now the Center City area, where riots at the scenes of fires were commonplace. Volunteer fire companies wielded tremendous political influence, often to the point of being political parties in their own right. It is difficult to say to what extent the numerous riots, disturbances, and arsons resulting from this rivalry of firemen had reached in Frankfurt, because there are few surviving sources of information to consult. Local newspaper reports indicated that their occurrences, but official records before the formal establishment of the Philadelphia Fire Department in 1870 are non-extant. By 1870, the city and county of Philadelphia had been consolidated for 16 years, and the general public had cried out for an end to violence caused by firemen at the scenes of fires. On December 29, 1870, the city councils passed an ordinance which abolished volunteer fire companies. Such companies prepared to go out of existence in the winter of 1870-71, during which time the commissioners of the municipal fire department held their first session. On March 15, 1871, the new department was formally put into service, but some of the volunteer companies could not refrain from turbulent efforts to prevent the establishment of the reform. However, it was not very long before the city adapted itself to this change in the fire service. The following is a list of the various volunteer fire departments that existed and served Frankfurt before 1870, and then a list of those after 1870. I'll let you get the book to read that list. And finally, not quite finally, but let me get to, we'll find out what finally is later. There's one, John likes to tell stories, as I mentioned, and one, he's fascinated with cemeteries. He's done a lot of work with death certificates. He's an excellent source of a guide to death certificates online, which I've used. He found a murder, the Frankfurt murder trunk mystery. I'll read you just the introduction and let you get the book. Vanessa, do you have a picture of that trunk, maybe? On Wednesday, December 15th, 1914, at the corner of Adams and Kensington Avenues, some workmen were engaged in the job of deepening the cellar of a building formerly used as a laundry. Suddenly, one of the workmen struck an object with his pickaxe. Uncovering the rest of the soil covering this object, it was discovered that someone had buried a wooden packing case. The workman proceeded to open the case with crowbars and found a steamer trunk inside. Upon opening the trunk, its shocking contents sent expressions of horror across the faces. Within lay the partially decomposed body of a young man, his facial features destroyed by lime placed in the trunk. The body also had a bullet hole in the back of the head. This discovery necessitated the summoning of the local police at Frankfurt Avenue and Rouen Street. 2 local police detectives were called in to examine the body. In one of the corpse's pockets was found a leather-covered notebook containing a letter from Joseph Sutton, a cousin of the murder victim. Since the premises were rented by Edward Keller of 1818 Wensley Street, the police promptly went to that address and searched it. In the cellar of this house was found a quantity of lime. It was the same lime found in the trunk. Keller had some connection with Daniel J. McNichol with regard to the Keller Leather Works factory at 12th and Hamilton Streets. Daniel McNichol was nowhere to be found. His wife had reported him missing shortly after March 30th, 1914. One of the Keller's immediate neighbors told the police that she had seen a packing case in front of the Keller home on April 1st, 1914, and that it was identical to the one containing the body. Edward Keller was arrested and arraigned in City Hall. During the arraignment, several witnesses were called to the stand, amongst which was Keller's former business partner, Edward J. Connery. Connery had bought out Keller's interest in the laundry business, a partnership that he had entered into in April 1, 1914. Keller had charge of installing a generator in the laundry's basement. Connery went on to say, "One day when I was in the cellar," this is a newspaper from a newspaper article, "I discovered that along Adams Street front, a part of the concrete flooring of the cellar, I should say for a space of between 5 and 7 feet square, had been dug up. This had been in March, and I saw in the last week of April, Keller said to me, 'Ed, I dug this place to put the boiler on.' The base of the boiler foundation he had made was covered with cinders. We continued in the business until July 31st, 1914, when I paid Keller $400 for the interest in the business. I remained at the same location until about 2 weeks before Thanksgiving that same year. Keller was to have remained with me for the week after July 1st. He did not keep his art agreement. He only returned to the building twice thereafter, and each time remained only for a brief period during which I was with him." I'll let you get the book to finish that, but it is a fascinating story, and Manton does an excellent job of keeping us interested in it. Finally, I have one other reading, and this is Undertakers, in the Undertaker section, Undertaker chapter. Resurrection Men is the caption. I had not heard of Resurrection Men before, but John tells us, no concise history of the funerary trade or cemeteries would be complete without an understanding of medical schools and their need for cadavers. With the advance in medicine throughout the 19th century, the education of medical students required hands-on experience, particularly where anatomy was concerned. Unlike today with its computer models, the medical students in the early 19th century actually dissected the bodies and deceased inmates of local asylums and the indigent dead from hospitals. That still goes on today, not digging people up from indigent hospital burial grounds, but people do leave their remains to science. My mother did. I just recently got her ashes back, and she was dissected at Temple University, and it is still a very well-respected and nice thing to do. I plan to do that myself, as does my wife. So that's still going on, but not These people are not called resurrection men, I don't think. These individuals would hang around. There simply weren't enough cadavers, which led to the lucrative business of resurrection men. These individuals would hang out in local taverns where mourners would frequent after recent interments or attend funerals, claiming some business connection with the deceased to learn of, or see the location of the burial site. Then, late at night, they would go to the cemetery and disinter the corpse and sell to the local medical school. As the century progressed and the police force became stronger, this nocturnal activity ceased. However, there have been very rare cases today where organ snatching by crafty undertakers and physicians in charge of hospitals still prevails in the bodies of the indigent. I don't know where this takes place in Frankfurt. He doesn't seem to give any particular location or why he chose to put this in here, to tell you the truth. Because this, I don't know. You can get the book and read it and find out more for yourself. But those are my readings of John Manton's book, and I'm very happy to do that. I had a lot of fun working with John Manton on this book, and I hope to continue the relationship. I will pass it on to Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Fred. That was a really fun. I like your choices of the variety of topics that you chose to read to us tonight. It really makes us understand that it reads very much like a guidebook, but at the same time, you know, lures you in with like juicy little details. So it's not just, here's this and this is, it's got a lot going on. I'm really thrilled. I want to read the book more now too. I haven't had enough time with it. And just to let everybody know, I'll cut away from Fred here now. We do have the book available on our website, just as a little interim. So it's there. And while I introduce Jerry, who's going to speak next, you can read that. The book is available at our website in our membership and services tab. So next up, Jerry is going to read a few portions of the book as well. And let's see what he has chosen. Right. Hi, Jerry.
Howdy.
Howdy. I love your shirt, by the way.
Well, there's a reason why I wore this particular one tonight, but I'll get to that shortly.
Gotcha. I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the Jolly Post Inn because the Historical Society of Frankfurt, where we are presently located, is located within the property of the original Jolly Post Inn. In fact, this, where we are right now, was part of their orchard where they had fruit trees growing. So when we talk about inns and taverns, early taverns in the old Oxford Township, in which the borough of Frankfurt is situated, were also known as public houses, inns, or ordinaries that provided travelers with lodging, meals, and social interaction. These inns were usually built along major routes or roads between larger cities of Philadelphia and New York, where coaches stopped for their passengers' meals and or lodgings for the night before continuing on their journey. The aforementioned coaches were also used to carry mail between towns and cities along their respective routes. And I'll just mention, for that reason, a lot of these places were associated with post offices. The post office was located in these type of buildings. And thus, that's why the Jolly Post was called the Jolly Post. So it's at 4608 Frankfurt Avenue on Orthodox Street. It formed part of the main passage that connected New York and Philadelphia. John Worrell purchased the property in 1698. The inn opened in 1700. His son Isaiah may have been the first to operate the inn from this location. In 1894, a notice for the sale of this inn appeared in the local papers, and that an offer of $20,000 was made to the then incumbent owners, the Comley family. The heirs of Caroline Comley, who died in 1880 under her will, were authorized to make the sale. To whom is not mentioned, the Jolly Post Inn was demolished, sadly, in 1911. There was a 1912 newspaper report that some anonymous and enterprising individual had made a quantity of walking sticks from the rafters of this inn and advertised them for sale. I don't know if we have one such item in our collection, but we do have quite a few other artifacts from the Jolly Post Inn. So now I'm going to talk about the Historical Society itself. And I was a little bit dismayed at first to see that we only had one little paragraph under libraries. The Historical Society of Frankfurt Archives and Library, founded 1905, 1507 Orthodox Street, Frankfurt. Its library and archives are in a house-like building they paid to have built in 1930 to contain their large collection of books and materials dealing solely with the history of Frankfurt. Hours of operation are extremely limited, and I believe we have a picture of the building that was here before the Historical Society was built. And in that building for 10 years between 1920 and 1930, when our current building was built, this was the Historical Society of Frankfurt headquarters. But there wasn't enough of it to house our collection and the auditorium that we have now, so thus the present building was built. Okay, so having said that, when I got to the end of the book, I discovered that we constitute Appendix D, and we get a whopping 10 pages out of that part. It's like Fred mentioned, a lot of this is lists of things. And so here he lists quite a bit of what our holdings are, 10 pages worth, just to document all the various things we have. We have scrapbooks from 1907 to 1973. We have scrapbook and photograph album collections, the Josephine P. Hunter scrapbooks, printed matter and ephemera collections, deed collections, and included in the deeds, we have two documents that were signed by William Penn himself, one from 1681 and one from 1684. And then we have organizational and business records from 1809 to 1986. As Fred was talking about, we have fire company record collections from 1793 to 1925. And then we have small manuscript collections from 1774 to the 1990s. And among that, we have the Hilton family Civil War letters, which brings me to one of the topics that one of our next projects that we're working on is to transcribe some of these Civil War letters from the Hilton family. And I believe we have a picture of one of these. Yes, there it is. This is an original Civil War letter written by a young soldier to his family back home here in Frankfurt. So what we're doing is we're going to edit some of these and transcribe them and publish them in a book sometime in the near future. And if you have any interest in participating in this project as a volunteer, we would love to have you come in and help with that, because believe me, I've done some of this before, and it can be a real strain on the eyes to read that old style handwriting. Okay, so there's that. The Frankfurt Yellow Jackets collection. I think it's fair to say that we are the repository for the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, who are sort of the predecessors of what we now know as the Philadelphia Eagles. And I wore this shirt for that reason. This is my Frankfurt Yellow Jackets t-shirt that I wore especially for this occasion. And one of the things that we have in our collection is original programs, from game day programs for the time that they existed, which was from 1923 to 1931. So I'll read a little bit about that. The Frankfurt Yellow Jackets were an early 20th century football club located in the Frankfurt section of Northeast Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The team was the first professional football team to play in Philadelphia, joining the National Football League in 1924 and winning the NFL championship in 1926. And I believe this program is from the 1926 championship season. It doesn't match the t-shirt that I'm wearing, but we have another whole set of programs from a different year that has this style, and this was taken from one of those. So the collection consists of photographs, negatives, programs, and other ephemera relating to the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, the professional football team that was the predecessor to the Philadelphia Eagles. Also included are photocopies of materials relating to the Yellow Jackets mounted on foam core. There are home game programs from 1923 to 1931. Photographs inside. Photographs include team photos and depictions of practices and games. The negatives are of practices and action shots of various games in which the Yellow Jackets played. The negatives are labeled in groups with game dates and participating teams. There are also two scrapbooks, circa 1925 and 1927, with newspaper clippings about the Yellow Jackets. Is my time up? Darn. Okay, I guess I have to carry on then. Oh, thank you, Susan. I needed that. Okay, we touched on transportation a little bit.
Oh no, you're still going. Okay, I missed
I
what
didn't know.
No, keep going. We've got pictures to show.
Oh yeah, okay. Well,
Okay, back to you.
Back to transportation, if I can find that. We already touched a little bit on the stagecoach part of it. But after a while, people kind of got tired of riding in stagecoaches because they were very bumpy and uncomfortable. And around the same time that trains were invented, they started laying tracks down, and this made it easier to put a stagecoach on the rails so that it wouldn't be as bumpy and have a much smoother ride. So, and that eventually evolved to what we now know as the trolley car. But the reason what this is leading up to is that in November of this year, in the fall, marks 100 years of the Frankfurt L, and we intend to commemorate that with a program dedicated especially to that, to the building of the Frankfurt L. Okay, so the Market Street subway was originally built a few decades earlier, in the early 1900s, and along about World War I, they decided to extend it up this way towards Frankfurt. So there's quite a bit of detail about the Frankfurt L in this book. But I don't want to go too much into that because that's going to be the subject of an upcoming program. But I'll just read a little bit about that. The Market Frankfurt line is embedded in the history of Frankfurt, and for many years after it was put into operation, became the lifeblood that caused tremendous economic growth of the town up to and through the Great Depression of the 1930s. Its implementation was a Herculean task that took several years to complete. The work was done in sections, with construction of the first part commencing in September 1915. As the work progressed, it nearly came to a standstill by America's entrance into the Great War in 1917, when materials were diverted to the war effort. By 1920, about 65% of the work had been completed. The superstructure had been completed between Dyer Street, south of Pratt Street, and I believe we have a picture of the construction of the L at that. Thank you. With one of the older trolley cars running underneath it. The line was finally dedicated on November 4th, 1922, 100 years ago, and opened for service on November 5th. It bore a price tag of nothing less than $15,604,000, which was no trifling sum during the 1920s. This amount would be comparable to $229,253,785 at the 2019 rate of exchange. After 66 years of constant use, general wear and tear had weakened the structure and necessitated its reconstruction in 1988. The reconstruction of the Frankfurt L structure was nearly complete by 2000, with the exception of the elevated section from Dyer Street to the Frankfurt terminal. In 2003, the Bridge Pratt terminal was closed and replaced with the new Frankfurt Transportation Center. After Bridge Pratt closed, the station platforms and remaining unreconstructed elevated structure above Frankfurt Avenue and Bridge were demolished. The new $160 million Frankfurt terminal facility was built on attractive land off Frankfurt Avenue, formerly part of the adjacent bus and trackless trolley service depot. So I hope my time is up now, because my voice isn't going to hold up much longer. Do I still have time?
If you want to, you do.
No, I think I covered pretty much everything I was going to.
Okay. So there were a couple images we didn't get to this evening, and I'm just going to throw them up here. This is the image, or an older image, of the Historical Society as it stands today. I think we were going to throw that in at some point when Jerry was talking about the establishment of the Historical Society. And were we going to talk about the quarries at all? The Denai Playground? Was that?
Oh, yeah, I did talk about that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Let's just maybe let's go over the photos real quick. So I'll
okay,
throw,
let me read
throw up this guy.
Let me read the section that pertains to. If
Sure.
one walks down Church Street today and enters the tennis courts to the playground, and walks a little further across a paved over area to the retaining wall of the former St. Joachim parochial school building, there is seen the jagged edges of the top of the infamous quarry, a piece of unerased history that still survives. And there it is. Yeah, I'm sorry we breezed past that. But,
And
so
then
there's the quarry.
this is an image of the quarry as it was in that area at the time. So definitely a big change.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Jerry. That was another very nice choice of variety from the book. I think we've really demonstrated that this book has a lot to offer and that there's something for everybody in it. It can get into juicy details. It can be a guidebook. I'm really excited about it, and I'm glad that we have it up to offer.
Thank you.
Cool. So, in closing, you guys get to see me do a nice little sales pitch about the book. So we do have the book available on our website. Our website is thehistoricalsocietyofFrankfurt.org, and I'm going to post up the banner here. There we go. So you can go to our website, and it's not for purchase, it's for a minimum donation of, but the minimum donation at $20 is definitely a steal for this type of book. I mean, it's got a lot in it. There's a lot to interest anybody who has an ounce of knowledge about Frankfurt, for sure. So either just go to our website and toggle to the page that is membership services purchase. We've also got a number of other things on there as well. Any of the images that you saw in tonight's program, those were ours, and they are available for purchase in digital format by going to that same page on our website and purchasing what do we call it here? High resolution image reproduction. And for that, at $20, you will get a digital ready to be printed image that you can have printed on whatever media you choose, and you can use it for your personal use. Of course, if it's not going to be personal use, then other restrictions and qualifications apply. But we do have images available for purchase. So anything that you've seen in our programs over the past, 2 years since we've been doing live streamed, you can purchase as well. And of course, there's lots of really good photos in this book. So don't hesitate to pick it up, if only for that reason as well. There's some really nice imagery and historical photographs in there that any local would love. So that is it, our program for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in September. We do have some really good ideas for the programming. They're not totally set in stone yet, but we've definitely got a good plan. And like Jerry said, we're going to be talking about the grand opening of the Market Frankfurt L line, because its anniversary is coming up. It's such a major part of Philadelphia history, and people getting from point A to point B. It's like, how could you not talk about something like this? And of course, as always, if you have any ideas of things that you would love to hear about or have more detail explained upon, then let us know. We would love to have ideas for programs. We're here to, try and make our viewers intrigued. So shoot us a line on our website, on our Facebook, however you want to, and we are happy to oblige. And also, don't hesitate to reach out for any type of volunteer activity. We've got a lot of stuff to do. If you've got some time on your hands, we have, like Jerry said, those letters to what's the word? Sorry. So we've got letters to transpose, and they're in old handwriting, and old handwriting truly fascinating, but definitely hard to read sometimes. So if that's something that sounds kind of fun to you, give us a ring. Thanks again so much, and we will see you in September. Good evening.